You're listening to episode 64 of the Fed and Fearless podcast. On today's episode, I'm chatting with Kaely McDevitt about how women and their practitioners can use lifestyle factors to help improve hormone health. So stay tuned. Hi, I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm a registered dietitian and coach trained in functional medicine with a passion for helping women just like you ditch perfectionism and use food, fitness, and self-care to fuel your bigger God-given purpose. I believe that it's possible to achieve your biggest life-changing goals without the frustration, obsession, or negative self-talk that so many women subject themselves to every day. All you need are the right tools, the right mindset, and the faith to turn your dreams into reality. I'm here to guide you along the way. The truth is that you are so much more than a body, and I'm on a mission to help you change the way you think and act at a core beliefs level so you can transform your physical, mental, and spiritual health from the inside out. Are you ready to become fed and fearless in your pursuit of a healthy, meaningful life? Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fed and Fearless podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld. I'm your host as always, and today's episode is with somebody who has a lot in common with me when it comes to the particular businesses that we run, as well as a lot of personal life experience. So it's a little bit more of a friend-to-friend kind of conversation that we had today, but I think it's super fun, and I hope you guys will enjoy it too. So today's interviewee is Kaely McDevitt, who is a registered dietitian that helps her clients personalize their nutrition for optimal health and hormones. Kaely runs a virtual private practice specializing in women's health and is a co-creator of the online women's health course and community, Her Hormones Academy. She is energized by helping women take back the power over their health and well-being. And she's also the creator of Leveraging Labs, which is a program for registered dietitians to learn how to use lab tests to help serve their clients better. Kaely and I kind of talk about a lot of different things today, including hormone health, symptoms of hormone issues, why we might be experiencing hormone issues, the lifestyle factors that affect our hormones, and the steps that we can take to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help keep our hormones healthy and happy. And we also get into some detail about how practitioners can use these strategies as well as advanced strategies like testing to be able to get their clients better hormone health results. So it's definitely a broad episode all about hormone health and all about how to maximize hormone health, whether that's for yourself or for your clients. And so I'm super excited to have Kaely on the show with me today. She's a great guest, very knowledgeable, very well-spoken, and just a pleasure to have on the show. So without further ado, here is Kaely McDevitt. All right, everybody. Well, I am so excited to have with me on the show today, Kaely McDevitt. Welcome to the Fed and Fearless podcast, Kaely.
Thanks so much for having me, Laura.
Kaely and I met in person for the first time. I think it was like about a year ago. I was in California for a business event. Remember when those used to happen?
Yeah.
Traveling and conferences, things that I'm like, man, I did a virtual conference over the weekend. I was like, it was pretty good. Actually, I was really surprised how well he did for a virtual conference, but I was like, oh my gosh, I hope we get to start doing like real events.
I miss those in-person events.
Well, and then the cool thing is like certain events, even though I wasn't there to see nutrition business owners, I made it a point to like meet up with you and Steph Godreau. And I forget if there was anyone else in California, but it was just really lovely to get to have dinner with you and hang out in, I forget, where were we? Was it Huntington Beach? No.
Yeah, we were in Newport.
But yeah, that was really awesome. And Kaely and I have a lot in common as far as our business journey is concerned, where we've worked with health clients, women's health clients, and now we're both coaching other dietitian and nutritionists for various goals with their businesses. So it's just really cool to get to talk to somebody who has so much in common and has such a similar journey as I do. But for those people who don't know you, Kaely, could you just spend a few minutes to tell us your story, particularly about how you got so passionate about women's hormonal health?
Sure. So I am a dietitian like Laura, and I went the traditional route to become a dietitian and had it set in my head that I was going to be in sports nutrition. I was always an athlete, and I was like, I'm going to be a sports dietitian for some professional team. It's going to be awesome. I even got my master's in nutrition and exercise physiology. Like, that's how much I thought that's what I was going to do. And during my time in school and during the year in my dietetic internship, I was developing a lot of pretty significant hormonal issues. Most of mine were tied to being on hormonal birth control and having a pretty bad reaction to that, and switching types repeatedly and voicing concerns to my OBGYN and mostly getting those dismissed, and then coming back to what I was learning in school and trying to help myself and realizing that I really couldn't with what I was being taught. And so this caused me to go down a whole lot of other rabbit holes outside of my curriculum, and eventually was able to help myself transition off, find my way back to feeling like myself again. And it opened up a whole new passion for me in women's health, because I realized when I looked back at the journey that I was on, that there were actually a lot of women that dealt with the same stuff, and there really wasn't any information around for them. I felt very alone when I was navigating it too. So I started a blog and was sharing some of this stuff and was landing for a lot of women. And then I realized, like, maybe this is a natural fit for what I spend my time on. It's personally relevant to me. I'm so passionate about it. And so many women are looking for this. So I put an end to that dream of sports dietetics and like really dove headfirst into the women's health space. Worked for a lot of different companies on my way to starting a practice. And now that's what I do full time for the last several years, nutrition for women's health. And I love it. And I think it's great to see how much the interest in women's health has grown over the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, I know you see it too. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, even you mentioning the thing about transitioning off birth control being like really hard to find resources. It's almost like nowadays it's hard to imagine not having those resources whatsoever. And obviously it's thanks to the people like yourself, like some of our colleagues who have done that work to produce great content, books and, blogs and everything. And as well as people like you who have done that work to get educated and to get expertise on how to really navigate that in a way that can help other people. Because I feel like, I don't know about you, and honestly, I've mentioned this before on the podcast, I'm enough years out of school at this point that I'm like, do I even remember what I learned in school? Like, I'm trying to think, like, I know I can like put bits and pieces together, but I feel like so much of what I have learned in like the functional and integrative realm was not stuff we learned in school. Like, even with women's health, I'm like, did we go into things like PCOS very deeply, or like fertility or anything like that? I mean, beyond the basics, right? And not to say that a dietitian degree isn't valuable. And I think, all the science that we learn, the biochemistry, how to read research and all of that, the clinical experience, all of that's really valuable. But our education's super broad, and it's not, at least again, how many years ago did I graduate? 5, 6? No, 7. I'm like, when did what year is it? I'm like, I don't even know what's going on. I graduated in 2013. So that was 7 years ago. Why did I say 5? My business is like almost 7 years old at this point. But what I was going to say is, I don't feel like we learned, unless you got like a really great internship in a specific women's health focused space, I don't really feel like that was part of the education, and certainly not from a functional perspective. And so things might have changed in the last 7 years, but I know that a lot of the education that I got was from doing my own research and dealing with my own problems, which I think is a really common story for a lot of women's health experts.
Sure. I remember just getting into that and learning like the basics of how the female body is designed to work, and realizing like, how is it possible that I just went through all this schooling in the health field and I don't know this? And yeah, so like you said, I really hope that that has changed, but because you have to be so broad with that schooling in a limited amount of time, it's difficult to go down any depth in one particular topic. So yeah, it was definitely all outside of schooling for me too.
Yeah. I remember reading Lisa Hendrickson Jack's, gosh, is it The Fifth Vital Sign is the name of her book? And just being like blown away and thinking, first of all, like you said, in school, we didn't learn this level of detail about women's bodies. And like, even as a woman, I'm like, nobody taught me any of this stuff. I feel like, how is this possible that we went through 25 plus years of life, like having no idea about any of this stuff? So, and I think it's fascinating. And I think it's really empowering as women to understand our hormones and to understand the influences on our hormones and the benefits of having our hormones in balance and all of that good stuff. But I think something that sometimes can get a little confusing for people is this, like even just the term hormones, right? Like saying, oh, my hormones are out of whack, or like I have hormone issues. why do so many women believe that their hormones are their main issue?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I even find it a little cringy in myself when I'm just saying hormone health so often. I think that's the easiest phrase for people to understand what we're talking about here. But it gets misleading because that's usually not where the problem actually lies. I like to use an analogy like your hormones are your dashboard warning lights. You know, that they're not the root of what's going on, but they're usually what's letting you know and what's causing some of the symptoms that you notice. But if you think about how we've all been conditioned to think about health, you know, in a conventional medicine model, is it's very related to a diagnosis. Like we have to have a label to put on something in order to have a treatment plan for that particular issue. So when we're talking about women's health symptoms, the best label that we can put on that is a hormone issue, whether that be your estrogen's high, your progesterone's low, you know, you're not making enough testosterone, whatever it might be. It's easy to focus on that as the issue because that's just what we're used to doing. We want to put things in nice, neat little boxes so that we can have a specific treatment for that thing. And I think that prevents a lot of people from looking at some of the less fun things to focus on, like the lifestyle aspect, the managing of your stress, the getting better sleep. Those are the things that really are going to make change. But you don't really get a label of insufficient sleep. You get a label of like PMS.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I feel like even the word hormone is so, like we always think sex hormones when we say the word hormones. But I mean, if you think about it, we have adrenal hormones and thyroid hormones and vitamin D is a hormone. Like there's so many different hormones that our body actually has in it that, you know, to say, oh, it's hormone health. I mean, it can get so complicated when we use the term hormones versus looking at like, okay, well, the high estrogen is caused by something. It's not that getting rid of estrogen is going to solve all your problems, right? So it's kind of figuring out why is that high? And, you know, maybe some of it is detox capacity, but, you know, it's other things that you want to be looking at that are causing that result rather than saying like that is the root cause. So just to help our listeners understand what they should be looking for if they're experiencing hormonal symptoms, because again, if the hormones are not the cause, they're creating the symptom, but they're not the cause of the problem. What would be some of the most common hormonal symptoms that women could be having that would indicate something is wrong beneath the surface?
Yeah, good question. So starting with just looking at your cycle, obviously an irregular or absent cycle where we're not getting periods consistently or maybe not at all is a pretty clear red flag that there's something we should investigate there. And then if you are having regular cycles, but they're really symptomatic, like we get major PMS, you know, it's normal to have some changes in how you feel and function as those hormones change. But if it's changing the way that you live your day-to-day life, whether that's mood or sleep changes or bowel changes, that's something to be investigated. If the periods themselves are really painful or really heavy or are super, super light, where you're like not even really sure if it is a period, those would all be signs we should be looking at that. And then we can go even further into like acne, brain fog, sleep issues. There really isn't an aspect of how you feel or function that isn't in some way influenced by hormones. Like you mentioned, we've got a lot of hormones, not just sex hormones. But I would start with focusing around your cycle. Is that coming regularly? Is it totally absent? And are there symptoms that seem to be happening predictably right around that?
Mm-hmm. And I feel like the cycle piece is interesting because, again, you don't really learn this growing up. Mm-hmm. What is a normal menstrual cycle? And I think a lot of us can remember growing up and learning about this stuff from like a friend or, you know, maybe we had a mom that talked about it. I'm not going to throw my mom under the bus. I don't remember having a conversation about it with my mom, but I also have a terrible memory for growing up stuff. But, you know, it wasn't like there was anybody telling us this is what's normal and like this is how much you should bleed in general. And obviously there's going to be differences between people, right? Like we're all a little bit different and we're all going to have like some variation there. But, you know, like I've read articles where people say, oh, our country should have like paid time off for women to take like 3 days off a month to deal with their period. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, that is not normal to have to not work at all on your period. Now, I'm not saying I wouldn't enjoy that, right? Like I would love to just like, you know, take 3 days off and chill and watch movies or something. But it shouldn't be a necessity, right? Like it shouldn't be so debilitating that you have to like call out sick from work to be able to manage it. So it's just interesting that, you know, that mindset that periods should be awful. It seems like that's almost like built into women's psyches, like that's what they're expecting, so that when those things are happening, they're not actually recognizing it as a problem. It's like, oh, well, that's just periods and they suck. And, it's that time of the month and it's awful. It's like, well, no, it doesn't really have to be that bad. And if it is that bad, that means something's going on that's not great. So I know that you're super into the lifestyle piece. Like obviously you're a dietitian, so the nutrition piece, the testing and supplements and all of that stuff is a huge part of the work that you do. But I know that lifestyle is such a huge focus for your business as well. And I love, just seeing the different things that you talk about on like Instagram and that kind of thing, just discussing the different lifestyle factors that affect women's hormones. So from like a big picture perspective, why do you feel that so many women get caught up in a lifestyle that would lead to these type of hormonal symptoms and make it so that, hard or bad periods are normal for our country's women to be experiencing?
Yeah. So to paint that picture, we've got to back up just for a second. Remember that the decision that your body makes about whether or not to have a consistent cycle, of course, this is not on hormonal birth control, that decision is made by your brain in response to whether or not it feels safe. And that safety decision is coming from all the decisions we make in our day. What are we eating? What are we doing? How are we moving? Are we sleeping? How's our micronutrient status? What's our job like? Like there are so many inputs to that. And so if we think about the messaging, particularly for women in the health space, to crush yourselves in the gym, no days off, eating like 1,200 calories a day if you want to lose weight. Keto is super trendy. And then we've got to be intermittent fasting. And then, oh, wait, we've got to be doing something completely different every day to keep your body guessing. We've got so much extreme messaging, particularly for women that want to be healthy. And the result of all of those types of behaviors is a very unsafe signal to your brain. It's big changes in energy availability. It's big changes in inflammation and quality of life. And it goes in complete contrast to what we need to create a stable hormonal environment in a female. And really, we should be looking at how to create those safety signals, how to make your nutrition and your exercise supportive rather than detrimental to your health. And if you pick up any magazine that you see at the checkout at the grocery store, you'll find something in there targeted towards women typically that's going to end up being pretty stressful on the body, especially if done long term. And we could get even further into the fact that so many women work in addition to raising families. And like, there's just a lot more stress on the average woman's plate today than there was, 50 years ago. And that all has to be factored into the conversation about, does the body feel safe? It's all the inputs matter.
Mm-hmm. I love that perspective of safety. That's something that we talk about in my Get Your Period Back program, because especially with amenorrhea, it's like, that's almost the extreme result of the body not feeling safe. Now, obviously, a lot of times that comes down to like calorie and macro nutrition and, excessive exercise, that kind of thing. But it really is that multi-factor safety piece that we can look at pretty much everywhere in our life. Like, are we feeling safe? And I hate to say it, but we're recording this in 2020. I feel like this year in general has created a lot of feelings of like lack of safety for obvious reasons. It's not just like fake concern or something, right? Or unrealistic like concern about the things that are happening in our world. But if you think about like adding that to a big, workout schedule and, not a lot of sleep and working a tough job or a stressful job or anything like that, it's like those things all are going to compile onto each other. And, maybe you could handle a global pandemic okay if you didn't have all those other things going on. But, you add the pandemic on top of all the things that we're already a lot of times dealing with as women in our lives. It's like, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a significant increase in hormonal symptoms and hormonal imbalances and challenges and all the things that those symptoms come up when you're experiencing that lack of safety this year because of the like psychological safety issue added on top of the physical safety issues that a lot of women experience. Are you noticing like a big uptick of interest in the work that you do?
Yes, for sure. And it's also been interesting just to see the trends in my clients as this year has progressed. And I remember when this pandemic was first when the first round of shutdowns was happening and that fear was really high, like so many of my clients were having really delayed or sometimes missed cycles. And then they kind of came back and it normalized. And then with each new wave of like in general fear about what's been going on this year, you've seen pretty clear changes across women doing all kinds of different things in their life, which has been interesting to have like a bird's eye view of how that's impacting a lot of women.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like, to bring up the pandemic situation, there's going to be a lot of stuff in our lives, like what's going on right now, that are not in our control, right? So feeling stressed or nervous about the stuff that's going on for 2020, although I will say, like, it is important to manage, information and, how much you're paying attention to and how much you're letting that stuff affect you. But realistically, we're all dealing with a little extra stress minimum this year. So it's one of these things where some stuff's not in our control, obviously. But I think there is so much that's in our control that a lot of times women are not choosing for a variety of reasons, whether that is they want to look a certain way or they want to achieve a certain thing in their life and they believe that working really hard is the way to get there. I feel like there's just so many pressures on women that, to be fair, I think we can select ourselves out of those and remove ourselves from those pressures. But it's not easy because there's so much societal expectation for what women's lives are supposed to look like. And I mean, I know one of the reasons I love being an entrepreneur, and I would imagine you feel the same way, is that we have so much more control over those pressures. And, sometimes they can be worse, but sometimes a lot of times if we're paying attention, they can be better because we can really decide like what our schedule is going to look like and how we're going to build that self-care into our routine as a function of growing our business.
Yep, totally agree with that. It's nice. I mean, it can be worse, but a lot of times it's better.
I feel like the main difference is we have a lot more control over it. So if you don't take that control, it can get a lot worse because, you're running your own business, everything's on you, that kind of thing. But if you are paying attention to it, it's something that we can actually make work for our advantage and build our personal wellness into the way we run our business so that we can actually grow our businesses better. Anyway, I can never stop talking about business. So I'm going to jump back into the hormones piece. Let's talk about some specifics as far as what women could be doing and things that they could be implementing to help improve their hormonal symptoms so that they are cutting that fear or lack of safety out of their day-to-day life as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. So the first one that I start with any one-on-one client, and I would assume it's the same for your Get Your Period Back girls, is we've got to make sure that we're eating enough on a consistent basis. Like we cannot progress any further in improving hormone health until that is squared away every single day. And that's often the hardest one for a lot of women that I work with. And it can take some time to get there and even figure out what is eating enough for that person. And it can be pretty shocking, especially if you're coming off of years or decades of under eating, even if it was accidental. And I do see a lot of that. A lot of times we just don't know how much we need to be eating. So it can take some time to relearn that, figure out what that actually looks like in terms of it, like real food in a day, not just a number, and then allow your body to adjust to eating that much food again and get those hunger and fullness cues back. So that's the first one. We have to be eating enough. From there, we can get more specific and talk about blood sugar balance, a good balance of macronutrients within that meal, but we can't go to those levels until the quantity is squared away on any given day. Once that's going well, we're obviously going to take a look at movement too, because that's going to affect energy availability and it's going to affect how much food is necessary for your body to feel safe. So we look a lot at total exercise volume, how many days a week, what kind of time frame, what kind of intensity. And with any hormone issues going on, we're typically looking at scaling back the intensity to focusing on strength training because we get some great specific to hormone benefits from strength training. And then things that are less intense on the body, like long walks, daily movement, stretching, restorative movement. And what's been interesting about this pandemic is everybody's working out at home now, mostly. And it went to like hit workouts on Zoom for like 100% of people's workouts. So we added a pretty stressful exercise modality on top of a high stress situation. So if you are listening and wondering, does exercise make sense for me on top of my hormone symptoms? We've got to be looking at exercise as a potential source of stress. It is a good stress oftentimes, but it can definitely tip the scale not in our favor. So looking at scaling that back, prioritizing things that are not sending additional stress signals to your body.
Awesome. I feel like everything you just described is like the first half of the program that I run, Get Your Period Back. It's like literally to the letter, even with like the fitness recommendations, because so many of the women that I've worked with in that program, they don't want to give up exercise. Like it's not about saying you can't exercise ever because it's going to mess your hormones up. It's about using exercise appropriately to actually improve hormone health. Because as you mentioned, and I agree with this, I actually think exercise is important for good hormone health. And to say, oh, well, you just have to like totally get rid of it to heal your hormones. Now, obviously, caveat is that there are some people that really do need a break for a period of time, and that's okay. There's no shame in taking time off, but it is something where having a healthy exercise routine is actually really important, and to be able to build that habit of doing the right type of exercise, the right frequency, having the right fueling for that exercise, having the right, rest type of activity day or something like that to really recover from that exercise. I think it's really, really important for women to get that right, because too little or too much can be such a problem for hormones. And I will say, I don't want to make it sound like it's like crazy overcomplicated. It's just, I think there's a lot of messaging that women get that makes them feel like if they work out in a way that is hormonally healthy, that's not enough, or that they're not exercising enough or whatever. And I just think of my own exercise history and thinking like, I used to go to the gym for like 2 to 3 hours a day. And I was like kind of a very social gym user. So it's not like I was like working out the entire time. I'd be talking to people if I ran into them, but I would go for like 2 to 3 hours a day in college. And I remember one thing that I always had a goal of when I was going to the gym was to burn 500 calories, like on cardio machines. I hate cardio though in general. Like I've gotten a little bit more into it with, I have a Peloton bike, which I thought I would hate. And I actually really like it, but it's because I only do it for like 15 to 20 minutes at a time. That's why I like it. But I was, when I was in college, I used to literally like track the hundreds of calories that I was burning until I got that 500. I was like, okay, I burnt 500 calories. Now I'm going to go do my weightlifting, which is like so backwards. To do all that calorie burn and then go lift weights is so dumb. But that's what you do when you're in your early 20s. So
at least you were lifting weights. You can give yourself a pat on the back for that. I was the one that was just on the elliptical for the entire time. And it was horrible.
But I thought, didn't you play volleyball?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So when I played volleyball, which was not in college, that was in high school, we did lift because that was part of it. But in college was the first time I was kind of on my own for any exercise. And I just thought, okay, well, I want to burn calories. So I guess I will get on the elliptical for an indefinite amount of time, which I hate.
Like read a magazine, like read Women's Health magazine about your 1,200 calorie a day diet while you're like pumping away on the elliptical. I feel like that was like so classic, like early 2000s college life. Like, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I don't do that anymore.
I know. Gosh.
I was still lifting because I played volleyball in college for a year. And I feel like that was pretty much the best shape I've ever been in my life. Like I will, I guess it's possible I could get that fit again, but I'm like over 10, like I'm like, 14 years older now. And I don't really have the dedication to train like that. But we were doing a lot of like powerlifting stuff to build strength. Like we were trained in powerlifting by the football trainers. So we like worked out with the football trainers to do like plyometrics and lifting and stuff like that. So it was like definitely pretty solid workout routine. But to be fair, I also didn't have a lot going on. College was kind of easy for me. Like I had a lot of free time, and when you're 19, your body can handle a lot more than when you're 33. So it's just interesting to look back at like what I used to think was normal for working out. And the sad thing is I feel like a lot of women, like they don't grow out of that. They do that in college, and then they get out of college and they go to like work, or they get married and start a family or whatever. And they think, oh, well, I have to maintain that type of exercise routine if I'm going to quote unquote, like stay in shape. And it's something that I've definitely really been happy to have realized over really the last 5 years of working with my trainer, that I can lift like 2 to 3 days a week total and get all the benefits of lifting. So it's like very nice to not think I have to work out every day to be in good shape.
I
Like
know.
good, like I could be in better shape, but like I really don't care that much anymore. I'm kind of just like, does it really matter? So I don't know if you have a similar experience of getting off that elliptical.
Oh my gosh, yes. And I'm all about the lowest effective dose for things,
Yes.
you know?
Oh my gosh, it's like I teach minimum effective dose to my health clients, and then I teach minimum viable product to my business clients. I'm like, you just need to get like the best thing in the least amount of time out there and not worry about making it this like massive, perfect, all the bells and whistles kind of thing. But I feel like, I mean, that's really just a mindset thing that I think a lot of women deal with. I mean, men maybe too. I don't know. Men seem to be like a little less affected by this stuff, at least my husband is. But I always think about how like women put such high expectations on themselves for performance, whether that is like health performance or work performance, relationship performance, entrepreneurship performance. And I feel like so much of that is constantly tapping into that like lack of safety feeling that our bodies are having. I don't know if that's something that you've noticed, because I know you work with both. I don't know how much of the mindset stuff you do with your entrepreneur clients, but I don't know if you notice that coming up for your business coaching clients as well.
Oh, for sure. It's the same thing. It's always striving to perform the best that you possibly can. And there's a lot of comparison that comes with that. And we don't need to go into a whole social media thing, but I just think we have access to what everybody else is doing all the time. And especially for the entrepreneurs, it's like you're seeing everybody's best moments portrayed on social media, and you're not seeing the behind the scenes that does happen for everybody that's in business. And that just adds fuel to that fire, and that, dictates habits that end up decreasing safety on the body and can definitely shift hormones not in your favor, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like especially in the entrepreneurial space, it's like not only are you comparing, I feel like I don't do this anymore, but I've heard a lot of people do this. And I used to do it. So it's not like I'm saying like, oh, I'm like above this, but it's just, I think I hit a point in my life where I'm like, I don't want to waste my life anymore doing this kind of stuff. But it's like that comparison to them themselves, like, oh, they look so happy, or they're like, they look so fit or whatever. Oh, they look so cute in that outfit. I can't wear that kind of stuff because I look stupid. Like, any kind of thing that comes up. And then when you add the extra entrepreneurial layer to it, it's like, oh, and my Instagram photos don't look that good. And, like, look at the business that she's running. And it's like this extra level of comparison that ends up happening. And then it creates this like constant sense of like, I'm not good enough, or like my life isn't good enough, or my business isn't good enough. And I feel like that scarcity mindset is always something that's at the root of that, like unsafe. Like if you really felt that abundance and that like, I have everything that I need, I am the person that I need to be, and like I'm constantly growing, like it's just that mindset ends up creating that sense of safety, because of like, I'm safe in my finances, I'm safe in my body, like I'm safe in my relationships, all of that stuff. So I definitely agree that social media can become this thing that like triggers that unsafe feeling in a lot of ways. And honestly, I've been going through Instagram and unfollowing any account that even remotely triggers that. Even things like political and like, social justice kind of accounts. Like I hate to say it, but if it's something that's creating this anxiety in me about, oh, I'm not doing enough, or, oh, I need to get involved, or, oh, like what's going to happen, like all of that stuff, I literally just have been unfollowing it. So it's like mostly home decor and some like, colleague accounts in my Instagram feed now, because home decor is like the least stressful thing for me to look at when I open the seriously. Oh,
so soothing.
So anyway, I feel like we're going to go off on a tangent. Hopefully people are enjoying this. I feel like Kaely and I, like I said, have a lot of things in common. So it's almost like we're just chatting with each other instead of recording a podcast now. So is there anything else? So we mentioned nutrition being huge, and I totally agree that the calorie amount thing is like, it's kind of like the non-negotiable. If you're not eating enough, it really doesn't matter what your macro percentages are, or like, even trying to go to sleep on time, like you're probably not going to sleep as well if you're not eating enough. So it's kind of one of those like linchpin habits that has to be addressed first, because if it's not, it's nothing else is really going to work. Are there any other elements of lifestyle that you like, once somebody's got their nutrition and their exercise dialed in, that they should be looking at?
Yep, for sure. So once those like foundations of your pyramid or what have you are built, then you can move up to more specific things. So that's where sleep definitely has to come next. I mean, not enough sleep or poor quality sleep is a very significant stressor on the body. So definitely talking about getting enough, how to improve that quality of your sleep, stress management habits and techniques. So a lot of times with my one-on-one clients, I'll assign a thing or two to try, whether that be a meditation app or journaling or breath work. And we try a few things and see what sticks. I think where people get stuck is that there's so many things that you could be, or maybe that you feel like you should be doing for stress management, especially if you're interested in the health and wellness space, that you get that analysis paralysis, or you end up creating this morning routine that's like an hour and a half long and not realistic. So you got to try things and keep the things that work, drop the things that don't. It's okay that not all of it work for you. The mental, emotional, spiritual well-being piece is hugely important too, whether that means seeking out therapy or a virtual women's group or something to give you the fulfillment in that piece of your life. And then we can also start to investigate other things. So for the women who get the nutrition and lifestyle and sleep stuff dialed away pretty quickly, but are still having lingering issues, that's when we could start digging into, is there something going on in the gut? Are there widespread nutrient deficiencies? Is there some inflammation or low grade infection going on that maybe we've missed? And it's at that point that I think that investigative work becomes appropriate. It's silly to start there though, because we've got so many things that can move the needle so dramatically that are oftentimes pretty straightforward and oftentimes free to implement. So it's like you got to start general first, and then you can get specific if the need is there.
Yeah. And I feel like that really goes for, like, it's good advice for the average person that's dealing with hormonal issues. And then I also feel like it's really good advice for clinicians, dietitians, nutritionists that are working with women, because like you run a program called Leveraging Labs where you teach women how, or not women, sorry, dietitians. It's probably mostly women. You're probably like me, where it's like you end up attracting all women. You're like, I don't just want women, but okay, This is what's happening. So not that I love working with women, but sometimes it's nice to have some male energy. So what I was going to say is that you teach dietitians how to use labs to support their clients. And because I know you did a guest expert interview for my Nutrition Business Accelerator coaching program. And one of the things we talked about is like how to build labs into the work that you're doing with clients. And that dovetailed really nicely with what I teach, which a big part of what I teach in that program is how to create your own proprietary process for getting clients results. And I think it's really interesting with the testing piece. I feel like a lot of people want to run those tests first because it's like, well, we can get good information and, kind of like put stuff on paper, which is like nice to see that data. Do you feel like generally with running tests as a practitioner, do you feel like does it depend on the person, or do you feel like those should always be done after you've implemented some basics with a client? Like, we're kind of talking a little bit more about clinical work here, but I mean, I think if you're somebody who's seeking a practitioner, you might be looking for someone who is thinking through this stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely depends on the person. So in my practice here, we're not blanket recommending anything for all people that come through, because it's just not always appropriate. And a big part of the screening process about whether or not we do take on a client in a one-on-one capacity is what prior things have they tried? What practitioners have they worked with? Do they have lab work already that we could make use of, rather than just allocating a big chunk of their health and wellness budget to testing that we may or may not need to get them results? The type of client that my practice draws tends to be a good candidate for testing, because they're typically the ones that have gone through the basic stuff already or worked with other practitioners. But we definitely teach that inside Leveraging Labs. Like, how do you know, and how do you make sure that when you recommend something, it actually is justified and will actually move the needle forward? Because if the results of the lab that you order aren't going to change your recommendations, then you probably shouldn't be ordering it. And so if you're somebody looking to hire a practitioner, that's a good conversation to have with them too. Like, I see you recommend this. How would that change what we do together? Because these specialty tests come with an investment, and they can be totally game changing. I'm a huge fan, major nerd over these things, but when applied correctly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I 110% agree. Like, I think with testing, one of the issues is that if you do it too soon and they haven't really made any sort of lifestyle changes, it's almost like that information is no longer very helpful, because hormones can change so fast. I mean, you can really have just within a couple of months, if somebody's made some changes to the way they're eating, the way they're exercising, like their hormones can respond very, very quickly. So if you're getting that test done in the beginning, it's not to say that that information's inaccurate. It just means that you could have spent 3 months working on the foundations that you just talked about and really get somebody feeling a lot better. And in many cases, maybe 100%, right? Like you could potentially get someone to 100% of the results without doing a test. And again, not that the test is harmful, but they're not cheap, right? Like they're a financial investment. So if you don't need the test, I wouldn't say start with the test. Now you might have a approach that you save the testing for after things have been implemented, or you have the testing as an option, which is something I would say that's generally how I've approached it when I've created any sort of process. Like even with my Get Your Period Back program, we didn't start with testing, but at the end of the program, after they'd already done the nutrition, the exercise, the lifestyle, sleep, stress, mindset, like all the things that really do make such a huge difference, if they do all that and then they're still having issues, that's where the testing is really valuable, because it's like you've gotten rid of any of that, like it's almost like static, right? It's like noise in the data that if you take that out, then you're really seeing the actual picture of what's going on, versus if they're eating 1,200 calories and doing CrossFit 6 days a week and, going to bed at 3:00 in the morning, I don't need a hormone test to tell me what we're going to do, right? Like I know exactly what we're going to do to help somebody start feeling better. So I think that's a really great point, that as a provider, you want to be thinking about where does your testing fall into your overall process, and should that actually be something that comes first, because maybe doing it first is not very valuable. And then if you're a patient or a client, not being afraid to ask your potential or current provider, if we run this test, like, is that going to make a difference in the actual recommendations? And if so, great, let's do it. Or if not, if we can get a lot done without doing that test, I think that would be good to be having that conversation.
For sure. And it's a good reminder for practitioners and clients alike that we can't get so narrow focused on the cool tests that are there, because trust me, I think that they're amazing too, that we forget about the power of some of those foundational things. And I think I talk about this with the Leveraging Lab students often. You're diving into the nitty gritty of these tests and feeling like you've got to be so nitty gritty with your recommendations that you're forgetting how powerful just improving someone's nutrition can be. And it's remembering to come back to that and knowing that that's your foundation. You can get more specific from there. It's like, I always forget what the saying is, the cart before the horse, or whatever that is. But yeah, I can never get that one right. But
I think that's literally just what it is. Okay. It's like, don't put the cart before the horse.
Yeah. So it's just remembering how much you can move somebody's health needle in the right direction from the things that may seem like basic and obvious.
Yeah. Well, and also remembering that the people you're working with are humans, right? So there's only so much we can ever really implement at once. And you have to really, the word triage comes to mind. Like, it's like you have to really figure out what's going to be the biggest needle mover for that person. And if you're going to do a test, a lot of times those tests are going to help you figure out, I mean, in my experience, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of times that's where you're going to get fine tuning of supplements with those test results. Whereas like basic lifestyle stuff that, again, sounds really simple, but eating enough, eating the right macro balance, like meal timing, all the things that we learn as dietitians, like this is actually stuff that we got taught very, very effectively information about. Doing that stuff first, so that when you go to do the testing and you go to do the like fine tuning of the approach, you've already gotten a lot of results and you've already gotten a lot of improvement because the person put their energy into the thing that really mattered. So I feel like, it doesn't have to be this like all or nothing situation. Like, oh, I can't do testing until they've been doing nutrition for like 3 months. It's just remembering that the hormones are going to react very significantly to those lifestyle changes, and to get that hormone information now when they haven't made those changes yet, it's probably actually not going to really benefit your process the way that it could if it were to come later after those lifestyle changes had been put into place.
Yep, totally agree.
Awesome. So as far as any sort of last minute words of wisdom, I know we've kind of gone all over the place today, which is like definitely my my tendency if I'm talking with someone that I know and I have a lot in common with. As far as a patient or client is concerned. So the people that are listening that are experiencing hormone issues and need help, and maybe they've already made some changes, maybe they've tried to implement some lifestyle stuff. Do you have any sort of like best next steps for them to take? Let's assume they're not working with anyone just yet, but they've already been learning, they've been listening, they follow you on Instagram, or like, they're getting a lot of education right now. Is there like one thing that you would suggest that everyone should do to take a effective step towards improving their hormone balance?
Yeah, it would be to learn how to track your cycle, if I had to pick one thing. And this doesn't necessarily apply if you're not having a cycle. That would be a surefire sign that maybe we should get a practitioner on board and help you with that. But if you are cycling and you're dealing with some nagging symptoms, one of the best and most empowering things you can do is learn how to map that out. There are lots of great books and resources and Instagram practitioner accounts with great trainings and webinars and stuff that you can find. But knowing how to map out where you are in your cycle so that when you do have symptoms, you can see where in your cycle that's falling, gives you so much insight about what might be out of balance for you. And when you come to a practitioner, should it escalate to that point where you want some help, if you already know where in your cycle these symptoms are having, you've just really cut down the length of time it's going to take to improve upon that. And on top of that, knowing where you are in your cycle is such a cool thing. The amount of understanding that you create for yourself and for your body is pretty incredible when you learn these things and understand yourself on that level. And it gives you so much more control over what's going on, how to see what you might need to do to improve upon those symptoms. And it puts you in a position of control again, instead of just waiting for someone else to improve it. That's where I would start if I was doing all the basics.
Yeah. I love it. And I especially love the fact that like, if you are going to go to a practitioner, a good practitioner that is knowledgeable about hormones will want to know that information, right? So if you can kind of get a couple of months of tracking under your belt, and I'm not saying to like avoid going to a practitioner, but if you already are tracking that information and when you decide that it's time to get some support, have that information to bring to a provider. It's just going to shorten the amount of time that it takes for them to help you figure out what's wrong, rather than being like, okay, let's start by now learning how to track your cycle. And there are some great providers out there that do that. You mentioned resources like I had talked about Lisa Hendrickson-Jack's books. Like that's probably my favorite one because it's short and it's really to the point and she's great at explaining stuff. But even just starting there so that you can start to figure out like, when are you not feeling well? Or, are your cycles long? Are they short? Are they, just getting that information and having that information to bring to a provider, I think is a great tip. Now I guess my last question, this is something that I see coming up. And actually, I get asked this a lot and I don't ever really know what to tell people because so much of my understanding of nutrition, obviously I went to graduate school and everything, so I have that background, but all of my functional medicine and integrative medicine information generally has come from self-study. Also working for Chris Kresser for, I think I was with him for like 7 years, working to help him create stuff for his business, like being able to actually like read research and like turn it into guidelines for programs and that kind of thing. Like that was my job. So that's where I picked up a lot of this understanding of integrative and functional medicine. And then even from a women's health perspective, it's a lot of personal interest that has just led me to, learn this stuff. So a question that I get asked a lot is like, if you want to learn more as a dietitian, nutritionist, some kind of practitioner, if you want to learn more about women's health and hormones and how to work with those, are there specific resources that you recommend? And feel free to plug yourself too, that you don't have to like send people to other people, but if there's any specific resources that you think people can get educated through so that they can more effectively help women with their hormones, what would you suggest?
Yeah, there are a lot of good books out there by some pretty incredible women's health practitioners. I think some of the first couple that I read were Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Toni Weschler. Laura Bryden's book is amazing. Period Repair Manual, a good place to start. Dr. Aviva Ram has some great practitioner trainings. I'm in her herbal medicine for women training, and I have been for a while. I think I will be for a while because it's self-paced and that just does not suit me. It's self-paced.
You're like, I'm going to be there forever because I'm just going to like chip away at it.
But it's great. And she's got a functional medicine for women's health practitioner training too, which would be a great place to start if you're brand new in the space. And then I would say if there are practitioners that you look up to in the space, reach out and see if mentorship is an opportunity or interning with them is an opportunity, or even if they're hiring. And then if you're specifically interested in how to use lab testing as part of a functional nutrition practice, I teach a program a couple times a year for dietitians called Leveraging Labs. And we get into the how and the why of building lab testing into your practice and dive into the interpretations and how to build programs around that. So there's a wealth of information out there online, and don't be afraid to use social media socially. I just remember connecting with a lot of women's health practitioners just on there and letting them know I loved the work that they were doing. And you just never know what kinds of opportunities can pop up from that. You're not going to study functional nutrition for women in your undergrad program. It's just not that way yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like people have asked me, they're like, what's a really great graduate program for functional medicine? I'm like, honestly, I have no idea. I didn't do one. I mean, I went to a great graduate program, but it was in public health in a conventional university setting. So I do not have the answer to where you go to get a formal education in functional medicine, but I think those resources are great. I've heard good things about Aviva Rom's stuff, and I know that my clients who have done your program have always been raving about how awesome it was and how great of a teacher you are, and how that's something that they've been successfully able to build into the work that they do with their clients, which I'm all about helping dietitians and nutritionists get better at actually getting results for their clients. I think a lot of business coaches out there sadly focus so much on the marketing piece that like they don't really touch on, are you actually selling a good product? Like, I hate to say it, but it's like, I think you can build a lot more confidence in your selling if you actually have something really valuable that you're selling, as opposed to being like, well, I know how to do the sales calls, but do I even get results for people? It's questionable. So I think for any business owner out there, investing in your skills as a practitioner, investing in your ability to serve your clients, your ability to help them get those results is always money well spent. So whether that's a, book or a program or a mentor or something like that, paying for coaching, that I think is always going to pay off multiple times over when it comes to the growth of your business. So it's definitely worth it. And I know you feel the same, like investing in yourself and your business and your knowledge and everything is always a high priority.
Yep, absolutely. And like you said, you hit the nail on the head. I think there are a lot of programs that don't teach how to actually get people results. And I would almost argue that our schooling was that way too. Like we had the foundations and all of the science, which is so helpful, but never like, how do you actually work with somebody? So you get through school and you get face to face with your first client and you're like, oh my God, it's a real person and they have real emotions. And how do I manage this? So it's great to see your program out there too, like actually teaching how do you do this though? Like it's great that you're getting clients, but how do you actually change their lives? Because that's what they're hiring you for. And that's what creates a business model that is continuous for you.
Well, I will say a lot of what I teach comes from doing it wrong originally.
Oh, same.
Like if any of my real early former clients, like when I first started my business in 2014, if any of you are listening, I apologize for giving you the like multi-page PDF of like the entire list of recommendations of like everything. I was like, all right, here's what we're going to do. Here's your food. Here's your exercise. Here's your supplements. Here's your lifestyle. Like, here's all your resources. Here's your recipes, blah, blah. And it's like, I just feel like that was probably so unhelpful to just like dump all that information on somebody all at once like that. And in my mind, I was like, oh, this is so valuable. Like I'm giving them everything. Like, they get it all in the first session. And sadly, that's not how a good coaching experience is designed to operate. So a lot of what I teach is just learning from mistakes over the last 7 years and hopefully helping people save a little time in their own mistake and learning process. So anyway, Kaely, it is always so much fun to talk to you. Always glad to connect with you and hear what you're up to and get the opportunity to share your brilliance with my audience. So if people want to connect with you more, if they're not already familiar with you, where would be the best way to get more information? And let's start with health. Like if somebody wants to work with you or wants to learn more about the health piece, and then you can also throw in if there's people that are practitioners that want to learn from you.
For sure. So on Instagram, you can find me at Kaely RD. My name is spelled weird. It's Kaely. That's where I do most of my free educating on hormone health stuff. So if you're dealing with symptoms and you're looking for some direction, start there. My website is Kaely RD as well, so keeps it very simple. But that's where you'll find more information about how we can get in touch to work together if you're looking for some help. And then if you're a practitioner and leveraging labs perked up your ears, you'll find that information on my Instagram and my website too. There'll be a practitioners tab for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Kaely. It was really awesome to get to chat with you and to get to talk a little bit about the key factors women should be looking at when it comes to improving their hormone health. So anyway, thanks to those of you for hanging out with us for the last hour, and we will see you here next week on the Fed and Fearless podcast. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Laura.
Hey there, Laura here again. Thank you so much for listening to the Fed and Fearless podcast. Your time is your most precious resource, and I'm so grateful that you choose to spend some of it with me. Now, if you're enjoying the podcast and want to continue supporting my work on this show, I would very much appreciate it if you would leave a review on iTunes. By leaving a 5-star review, you'll help others find the show and help me spread my message to a larger audience. You can go to fedandfearless.com/review to find a button that'll take you right to iTunes to leave your review. And I have a special gift for you as a thank you for helping me share the podcast. Once you leave your review, send a screenshot of the review to hello@lauraschoenfeldrd.com. Or you can DM it to me on Instagram at lauraschoenfeldrd. Once you do, I'll share a free copy of my Overcoming Undereating ebook. Then share a favorite podcast episode in your Instagram stories and tag me at lauraschoenfeldrd. And I'll also give you a free copy of my 14-day calorie challenge recipe guide. Together, these bonuses are worth $44 and will help you become Fed and Fearless. And you'll get them absolutely free for just helping me grow the podcast. Again, thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you here next week for the latest episode.